Hello everyone, Charles Watts here. Welcome back to Inside Arsenal. It is Friday. The weekend is very nearly here. The Premier League is very nearly back. Mikel Arteta has just been speaking ahead of Arsenal's return to Premier League action tomorrow. That game at Bournemouth. He's given a lot of updates, actually surprisingly open about Arsenal's injury situation going into the Bournemouth game, considering there's so many players that there are doubts hovering over. And I thought he was just going to flat bat it away, do typical Mikel Arteta stuff. But he's actually been fairly open on the likes of Saka, Martinelli, Havertz, Odegaard, Tomiyasu. Plenty of updates to go through. So we're going to run through all of those in a minute, talk about a few other things as well. So some interesting stuff about Thomas Tuchel's appointment and what that could mean. Also about the fact that a foreigner has taken over, been appointed by the FA to take charge of the England team. Some really interesting stuff. Good comments, I thought, from Mikel Arteta on that. We'll also talk about Jack Wilshere, who could potentially be on the move as well. Got some reaction from you guys to what me and James were talking about in Inside Arsenal Extra Time yesterday in terms of who could start in the weekend, specifically when it comes to the midfield. So plenty to get stuck into today as we head into the weekend and into that Premier League game at Bournemouth. And some good news from Mikel Arteta, I think, when it comes to the Arsenal injury front. Arsenal put out a load of photos yesterday. Not one of them included any of the players that had any doubts hanging over them, as usual. So when I looked at those, I thought, here we go. And I didn't expect much from Arteta in his press conference. But as I said, he was pretty open, especially for Mikel Arteta, who we know is usually such a closed book when it comes to injury updates. On Bukayo Saka, he said, it's not serious. He has evolved really well. He has done some things in the last 2 days. Obviously, he wasn't fit enough to play with the national team in the second game, but we are hopeful. We have a training session this afternoon. He did some bits yesterday, so let's see if he can make it on time. So that sounds fairly promising on Bukayo Saka. On Kai Havertz, even more promising. He said he had a few issues and we've been dealing with that. He's been absolutely brilliant. He has very good communication with the German national team, with the manager, and he understood the situation. Obviously, we had to modify everything that we could do. Here again, if he trains well today, he has a good chance to be fit and available. So good news on Kai Havertz. I mean, to be fair, the messages that I was getting the whole way through the international break was that Kai Havertz was going to be fine. I'd have been very, very surprised if we got to Bournemouth tomorrow and Kai Havertz was not in the team. The same goes for Thomas Partey. Mikel confirming that Thomas Partey is fit. He was asked and he simply said, Thomas is fit, yes. Gabriel Martinelli, a little bit more up in the air, as you would expect. Obviously, he's picked up that calf problem while he was away with Brazil on international duty. He didn't play in the second game, but he did stay in Brazil. Arsenal didn't rush him back or anything like that. As I said in yesterday's show, they were always comfortable to let him stay out with Brazil and fly back as scheduled with Gabriel Magalhães and the other London-based Brazilian players, which he did. He arrived at yesterday, went into London Colney. Mikel said he landed yesterday afternoon here, so we had a very short time to be with him. He went outside to do a little bit and to see how he was feeling, and today will be another step to understand whether we want to take the risk on if he is fit, because I know what the player is going to say. He is going to say, I'm going to be fit for sure. So Mikel basically saying now we're going to have to take the decision out of Martinelli's hands. Although he will say it's fit, we'll have to decide. And that is, is absolutely sensible, isn't it? You take the decision, not the player, because we know that Gabriel Martinelli, the type of player he is, how he always wants to play, the form he's in, the sort of mood he'll be in, confidence-wise, he'll want to carry that on. He won't want to kill the momentum that he's had built up over the last few weeks before the international break. So he'll want to play, but you just don't want to take any risks. Arsenal have got so many big games coming up in this little period now between Bournemouth and the next international break. There's 7 games, really difficult ones. Obviously, Champions League on Tuesday night at Shakhtar. Then it's Liverpool. Then you go into that away week where you've got Newcastle away, Inter Milan away, Chelsea away. You don't want to take any risks with your players. So we'll wait and see on Gabriel Martinelli. But certainly, again, he's not ruling Gabriel Martinelli out by any means. And as I said yesterday, they'll make a late decision on Martinelli. There'll be the training session today. They'll travel up to Bournemouth after that training session, stay in the team hotel. And so after today's session, they will make a decision on Martinelli and everyone else. So on Martin Odegaard, this is what Mikel had to say. He says he's not fit for this game. Next week will be a different story. When he says that, I think people are going to look at that and say, oh, that means he's going to be fit. I don't think he means it. I just think next week's a different story. It's a new story for Martin Odegaard. It's like go week by week, day by day almost. So I wouldn't get too excited by that specific line in the quote. So he says, he's not fit for this game. Next week will be a different story. But in that latter stage of rehab where he is at the moment, because he is already doing a lot of stuff, he needs to clear some markers. He needs to clear certain things. He needs to be comfortable, especially with the ball. Next week will be crucial to understand how close he is. He was then asked on whether he was confident that Odegaard would play at some point in these next 7 games before the next international break. And he said, yes, hopefully, yes. So that's good news on Martin Odegaard. Obviously, we heard the stories during the international break that he suffered a setback. I never was able to confirm those stories. All the messages we got was that wasn't the case. There was no confirmation coming through. And I think from these comments from Mikel Arteta here, it shows pretty clearly that he's still on track to be back around the sort of November time, which has always been the date that Arsenal have had in their head for Martin Odegaard. On Ben White, Jurriën Timber and Alexander Zinchenko, he said they are quite close to 3 of them. Today we have to try and push because we are struggling a bit with the numbers, especially on our right side. But hopefully we'll have some positive news and we'll have some players back tomorrow. So again, good news. It certainly sounds like at least some, if not all, of White, Timber and Zinchenko could be available. No Tomiyasu, though. The news that he had suffered a bit of a setback during the international break, that has now been confirmed by Mikel Arteta. He said it doesn't look like, hopefully, that it will be a long period, but we have to see when he comes back how he reacts to the load and to the impact on the pitch. We really need him. He's been incredible. The amount of hours that he's put in to get back, he did it. He was in great shape, and now he's got something else again. But we are all behind him. He needs our support, and hopefully he will be fine. So from those comments, you kind of get the impression that it's not a bad one for Tomiyasu, but it is something that's going to keep him out, at least you'd think, for a couple of weeks, which it's a massive shame. It's a massive shame for Arsenal. It's a massive shame for Mikel Arteta, but most importantly, it's a massive shame for Tomiyasu. As Mikel says there, these players, when they're injured, they have to put in so much work in rehab, have to be so disciplined in what they do to get themselves back. And Tomiyasu, more than most, has had to do that time after time after time because of this injury record that he now has since moving to Arsenal. And to go through all of that, to get yourself back on the pitch, to play a few minutes, and then suddenly something else springs up. Mentally, it must be so difficult for these players. And I know it's frustrating. I see it in the comments from you guys. Lots of you keep saying, look, we've got to wash our hands of Tomiyasu now. He just gets injured too much. He's got to go. We've got to sell him. And I understand the frustration in that. And, but no one's going to be more frustrated than Tomiyasu in it. And the thing with Tommy, he's such a useful player. He's so good in so many positions across that back line, well, in all the positions across the back line, that you can see how frustrating it must be for Mikel Arteta as well, because he knows how important he is. And he is, where every time he comes back, he plays. He might not be starting every game, but he's always one of the first substitutes to come on because Mikel Arteta trusts him implicitly. So it is a shame. It is a blow, and hopefully it's not going to be anything too serious because Arsenal need him 100%. The versatility he brings to that team, especially when you go into so many games now in such a short period of time. If you need someone to play at left back, at right back, at centre back, Tomiyasu can do all of that. So he's really, really useful. Arsenal just need to get him back on the pitch. But on the whole, look, take the Tomiyasu thing out of it. That is a positive update, isn't it, from Mikel Arteta, I think, ahead of the game against Bournemouth. Really, really positive. So fingers crossed, most of those players that we've talked about will be available. And then Arsenal have a very, very strong squad available for the game. And Mikel was very strong in his praise for Bournemouth and the job that Iriola's done. He says that they should be higher up than they are. They should have picked up more points in some of the games that they've picked up. Thinks they've deserved more, and they will be a difficult team to play against. No doubt about that. We know the sort of side they are now and how they play their football, and they will be difficult. Arsenal are just going to have to try and deal with it, play themselves into the game. They might be a bit rusty because it's the first game back after the international break. Obviously, it's going to be under the lights. It's not going to be the easiest games, but fingers crossed Arsenal can get the job done because you need to win this game straight after the international break, ahead of Liverpool next weekend. 3 points, an absolute necessity for Arsenal tomorrow. No doubt about that. Right, just moving on to Thomas Tuchel. Obviously, he was a big talking point during the press conference. I thought Mikel spoke really well about, not just about Tuchel, but about the whole process of the FA appointing a foreign manager. On Tuchel, he said, and on what Arsenal players sort of can think about it, because obviously Declan Rice, Bukayo Saka are going to be working with Thomas Tuchel, potentially Ben White as well. He says they're going to learn a lot. I think he's one of the best coaches in the world, in my opinion, without a doubt, with his experience, the way his teams are set up. Very exciting times. I spoke to a few of the players and straight away they had smiles on their faces. And that is always a good sign. Now, this is what he had to say about the fact that the FA have had to appoint a German or a foreigner instead of an English coach. And he was asked, do you think that's a shame for English coaches that they've gone down this route? And I thought this was really good stuff from Mikel Arteta. He says, I understand that it can feel sad for some people not to have an English manager there, and the history tells you how important this could be. But I think I would take a lot of pride that a lot of managers and a lot of people would do anything to become the England manager. That's related to, as a foreigner, how we are treated in this country, how much we love the passion, the respect, the history, and the way things are done in this country. I can say personally, you feel so related to where you are, even though you are not from here. I think that's a huge thing, and very little countries can say that. For me, this is like home. I've been here 22 years. I always feel respected, always feel welcome and inspired by this country, by the legacy and history of football and how you get treated daily. That's something as a country that you guys have to be so proud of. I thought those were really good comments from Mikel Arteta on the appointment of Thomas Tuchel. He was also asked, because apparently the FA obviously came out and said they interviewed 10 managers for the job before Tuchel was appointed. Eddie Howe's already said that he wasn't contacted, which is a surprise. You think if the FA are interviewing 10 managers, you'd think that Eddie Howe had to be right on the top of that list, because ultimately the priority would have been to try and appoint an Englishman. And the fact that probably the most in-demand English coach in the country and the most well-placed to get that job wasn't even interviewed was a bit of a surprise, I thought, when Eddie Howe admitted that in his press conference earlier today. Mikel was asked if he was one of the 10 who was interviewed, and he said no. He laughed about it. It was like, no, I'm not. That's not the case. And when he was asked if he wanted to go into international management, he's kind of said, look, at the moment I've got so much on at Arsenal, and he's still very, very young. I'm sure one day he will do it, but not for now. He's very much Arsenal manager. So yeah, really good comments I thought there from Mikel Arteta. Very interesting stuff from him. Right, here's one from Rakesh who got in touch. He says, hi, Charles, I hope you read this out. Did you watch the video of Ben White and Ben Foster? I see the characters Arteta invests in. White knows his weaknesses, but is so good using his strengths and his winning mentality. Majority of my experience as an Arsenal fan since 2002 has been bad. I clearly see where Arteta and are leading the club towards, and I love it from Rakesh. I did. Well, I saw some of it. And actually, I thought this was interesting from White. He was asked about the whole I don't like football thing, which has basically been a tag that Ben White has had to carry since that interview when he gave, which obviously was the reaction to it was so over the top. What he said at the time was, I don't want to go home and just watch football on TV over and over again, having played it. And I totally understand that. I absolutely understand that. Each player is different. When you're in the work that you do, for example, if you're a doctor, and you're treating people all day, every day. When you get home, the last thing you want to do is watch TV, like stick Casualty on the TV or something like that, isn't it? You want to sort of free your mind from that world for a few hours before you have to go back and do it all over again the next day. So I can totally understand why when Ben White finishes work, having trained all day, sat in analysis suites all day, watch analysis on the TV all day about players he's going to be coming up against, all that stuff, that when he gets home, he wants to go and play with his dogs, take his dogs for a walk, be with his family, be with his missus, all that sort of stuff. It just makes perfect sense to me. And so the reaction to it, I thought, was so over the top. And in that interview that he's given with Ben Foster, he said, look, people think that I don't love football. And obviously I don't watch it, but I could probably tell you most things about every winger that I play against, or the attributes that I'm going to have to come up against on the weekend. Playing right back, there's so many good left wingers. Every game, they're the best player. If you look at every team, one or two, they're the best. Disconnecting from the sport. Then on disconnecting from the sport, he said whether it gives him a boost, he says, it helps me when I come home from football. I completely de-stress and don't think about it. The next day, I'm 100% focused. I just don't see the issue in that. I can't understand how his comments created such controversy and continues to be a sort of stick that people beat him with time and time again. So, yeah, I thought it was a good interview with Ben Foster. If you haven't seen it yet, I'll get the link to it and drop it into the description below, so you can have a watch of it if you want, because there's some interesting stuff from Ben White. There was no talk about England, about whether he would go back. That was obviously off the table when it came to doing the interview. But yeah, other stuff, there's plenty of good stuff from Ben White in there. Just on Jack Wilshere, now he is very close to moving to Norwich. It's not a done deal yet, but all the signs are that Jack Wilshere will be moving to Norwich to become part of the first team coaching staff at Carrow Road. Very, very good move for him. Obviously, Ben Napper, who was been heavily involved in Arsenal for a long, long time, moved over to Norwich to become the sporting director there towards the end of last season. And Ben Napper and Jack Wilshere would have had a very close relationship, and Napper's obviously has used that relationship to set up these talks and get Wilshere through the door. For Wilshere, it's a great development step. No one, he's been doing very, very good things at the under-18s, in charge of the under-18s. He's just going towards his UEFA Pro license now. He's working towards getting that. And for him to move on to be part of the first team coaching setup at a very decent championship team who could potentially come up to the Premier League next season, it's a really good step in his development. It's a shame to see him go, but it's a very natural progression for someone like Jack Wilshere. He's always going to go at some point. It's what he wants to do. He's a very ambitious young coach. I remember sitting down with him not so long ago and having a chat with him at London Colney. And he never gave the impression that he was going to be at Arsenal forever. He always looked like he was going to move on. There was a chance he was going to move on last summer, potentially to go over to America to take charge of the Colorado Rapids. That didn't happen, but feels like Norwich could be a very good progression for him in his career. So we'll see how that progresses over the next few days or so. All right, just some of the reaction yet to what myself and James were talking about in extra time yesterday when we were looking at who could potentially start against Bournemouth. Could Mikel Merino come in for his debut? If that is the case, who would make way? Would it be Thomas Partey? We had a big debate about it. I think James basically went down the route. He wanted Merino to start. I felt that would have been a little bit harsh on Thomas Partey and felt that Merino still needed to do more to get himself into the starting 11 at Arsenal. And the Partey's been playing very, very well in the build-up to the international break and thought he deserved to keep his place in the team. This is how you guys have been reacting to that conversation. Stan says Merino and Partey need to share their game time. It's a long season and the position they play is pivotal to Arsenal's game plan. The only thing is that I don't think they're going to play in the same position. I think you'll have Partey as a 6, and when he's as a 6, you'll have probably Declan Rice playing ahead of him, and then Martin Odegaard, Merino will probably be on the bench. When Declan Rice plays as a 6, you'll have Merino as a left 8 next to Martin Odegaard. I don't really see a time when Merino and Partey start together because, and I know lots of you disagree with it, I still think that when everyone's fit, Declan Rice will be Arsenal's number 6. I'm sure of it. I'm so confident that will be the case. And I know lots of you disagree with that, but I think that's what Mikel Arteta is going to do. That is his plan for this season, is to have Declan Rice as a 6, Martin Odegaard as the right 8, and Mikel Merino as the left 8. We'll have to wait and see if I'm right on that, but I do think that is what his plan will be. Peter says, I would start Partey and Merino if fully fit. Rice needs a rest, plus he's looked average this year. Paul says, recent history shows Partey starts when he is fit. He has a unique skill set in our squad and the manager obviously loves him. Is there any chance of fitting Merino, Rice and Partey in on Saturday? I don't really see that as a midfield that works. I don't see it. I think it's got to be 2 out of the 3, I think, rather than all 3 of them squeezing in. And you're right, recent history shows Partey starts when he's fit. He started every game this season apart from the Carabao Cup. He started the last 5 games of last season when he came back from injury. He does. Mikel Arteta loves Thomas Partey, and quite rightly so. Thomas Partey offers so much to this team. But, and I keep saying but about it, I still think, and it is just a hunch, it's not based on any information, but I still think that when everyone's fit, if Merino gets up to speed, and this is the most important thing, if Merino starts to impress, really impress, when he's given opportunities, whether from the start or from the subs bench, I think that it will be Rice will move back to 6, and then him and Partey will probably share the minutes in that role. But I think that's what will probably happen. But thank you very much for all the reaction to that. Appreciate it as always. And that's it from me, everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in once again. I'll be back tomorrow morning to do my preview show, do the predicted 11, that sort of thing as we head towards that Bournemouth game. But until then, have a very good end to your week. Have a good Friday night, whatever you're getting up to. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one. Bye-bye.